Have you ever had the experience where a creative project or a nature trip didn't turn out quite the way that you were expecting? I know that I've had that experience, and that just happened to me today. I was planning on doing an episode for you about how to make a nature journal comic, and I was going to feed my snake and make a comic strip showing that. Unfortunately, I got everything totally ready and was really fixated on that idea, and it turned out that my snake is getting ready to shed skin. And when snakes shed their skin, their vision is impaired, and they often go into a mode of being defensive and not interested in eating food. So you can see that I set everything up here in my title page as if I were going to be feeding my snake, and I even have a little dialogue bubble here with the snake saying, "I'm hungry." And all of this stuff was ready for it to be about feeding the snake. And I was going to do a slow motion video and everything. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, and I almost gave up the video and the project altogether. After a little bit of thinking and reflecting, I decided to stick with it and actually nature journal what really happened. And so this is something that can happen to all of us, where we go out with a certain idea of how something is going to be, and if that doesn't work out, we often will give up our creative project or our nature journaling attempt altogether. So you can see here that starting with this dialogue box, I actually added onto it. It said, "I'm hungry," and that wasn't actually necessarily the case. Or maybe it's just more complicated, "and I'm shedding, so actually don't feed me." Now, I want to point something out. It is useful to do a little bit of anthropomorphizing in a nature comic. However, to remember that we are projecting stuff onto animals or plants, and we don't actually know what they're thinking. So if you use that, just realize that that is a mechanism for the comic to be more relatable or to convey the information, but that we actually are not sure of what's going on inside of that animal's head. So here you can see I did try to show an image of, this is me opening up the terrarium. This is a close-up of Astragalus' eye, the snake's eye, showing this kind of grayness. Here you can see me dangling the first mouse, which I accidentally dropped. And after I dropped the mouse, then Astragalus got all interested and seemingly defensive and was like stretching their head out into the terrarium. So I was a little bit scared to reach in, because this is not a poisonous snake, but they do bite quite a bit and it can be painful. So I was afraid to reach in there underneath the snake's head to grab that mouse that had fallen. So I defrosted a second mouse. You can see here number 2, and here I'm doing a parallel sort of image, which can be useful in storytelling, these two parallels. And Astragalus did smell it quite a bit with their tongue, so you can see the tongue flicking in and out there, but in the end abandoned it and was not interested. So I'm filling in my text underneath my images, trying to follow sort of a standard comic format, and trust me, making comics is way harder than you think. I've read a lot of stuff about it and made a few little ones on my own and in my nature journal, but it takes a lot of thought. You have to think about what angle you're going to show things from, what to show, what not to show, but it's a really useful practice for your nature journal. Even if the event that you wanted to write the comic about doesn't end up happening the way that you expected, it can still be a really good practice and a really good way to show some action. And maybe there's something happening in your house. If you have a pet, have you ever nature journaled your pet eating or drinking water? That would be a really cool thing to do, and you could even do a slow motion video of your pet. Like if you have a dog or a cat, maybe do a slow motion video of them eating or drinking, and then make a nature journal comic from that. It's going to be a challenge, and especially if it's something that lives in your own house, you might have this sort of attachment to it where you take it for granted or don't actually think of it as a subject for drawing. So that would be a cool challenge, and since I really wanted to show you some fun animal videos, I'm going to put in a video here where you can see my frogs and my lizard eating some crickets. And if you want to, you could pause that or put that into slow motion and make a nature journal comic from that. So let's go ahead and watch that. So like in all good storytelling in a nature comic, you can start with an establishing shot. You can introduce the characters. So right here at the beginning, you can see this Northern California alligator lizard in its full length, and maybe you could have a little drawing showing that. Now the action starts to begin. As you can see, I bring the cricket in here. So this would be a part where you're going to have to choose which clips, which scenes to actually show, because unlike in video, in a comic, you have limited choices for how many frames you can represent. The actual action happens pretty fast, so you can see the lizard already caught that, but that's something that you could pause or slow down and include in your nature comic. So in a good story, more characters come on the scene, and you can see here that there are some frogs. This is also your choice to make options about what to include, what not to include. Do you want to show the human activity, the human feeding, or do you just want to focus on the animals? Now remember that that's an intentional choice and has implications. Now this is also an aspect that you can decide about in your nature comic, is how to zoom in or zoom out. So when there's action happening, you're going to need to make some serious decisions about when to zoom in, when to zoom out. How would you show the activity going on with the frogs, or are you even interested in the frogs and maybe you want to just stay focused on the lizard? In real life, this would be very hard to journal in a nature comic, but with a video where you can pause it, you have a lot more options. Changing perspectives or angles is important in cinematography and also important in your nature comic. So what can you see from different angles? How do these frogs look different from this angle than the other one? Is that something that you actually want to include? If you got value out of this video, thumbs up down below, subscribe to the channel, and I picked out 2 videos that you can make nature journal comics from here. Bye.